It's time for more Manifesting Original Rich Bitch Experiences. I'm your host, Ava Beilke. Welcome back to the More Pod. I hope you're ready for story time because today is quite the story. On a rainy day, back in April, when I was feeling like life was getting a little boring, a little redundant, a little repetitive, I booked myself a trip. I booked myself a trip as one does when they need something to look forward to. And I booked myself a trip to New Orleans for June. Long weekend, vacation trip for me. So excited. My intentions for this trip were one, to explore a new city, because I love to do that. And I had never been to New Orleans. Two, I wanted to meet up with friends. So I had a friend that was going to be in New Orleans at the time. And so I figured, what a perfect little moment, a little excuse, a little meetup, have somebody that I know in the city that I can hang out with. And three, to create content. I wanted to bring a travel talk to the podcast. What I did not expect was to be bringing you a travel talk about my first paranormal experience at a hotel that I now believe to be haunted. But unfortunately for me, and maybe fortunately for you, that is exactly what I have for you today. It's taken me a month to sort of digest and process this experience. Typically, when I do a travel podcast, I'm recording it a week or 2 weeks post trip at maximum, right? Because I like to have everything fresh in my mind. But this one needed to settle. This one really needed to settle. And I was doing a lot of debating. I was debating about a couple things. First off, one of my questions was like, if I tell this ghost story, is anyone actually going to believe me? I think that's kind of interesting because as it was happening in real time, like I started to kind of talk about it a little bit with some of my friends and like, well, do you have videos? Like, do you have photos? I'm like, no, but I'm telling you what happened, right? So I was like, is anyone actually going to believe me? Um, but the more I've sat with it, the more I'm like, you know what? I believe me. And that's the most important piece of all of this. Like, I fully believe and accept and understand what I experienced. Well, I don't understand it, but you know what I'm saying. And the second thing that I was doing a lot of debating about was whether or not I was going to share the name, disclose the name of the hotel I was at, because my intentions are not to sit here and bash this hotel, right? But this is the experience that I had. And I'd be doing a disservice to you if I was to get on the podcast and be like, hey, this is what I did in New Orleans and this is where I stayed. Like, you should check it out. With also being like, P.S. P.S. You might have a paranormal experience. After much debate, I have decided that, well, one, I'm telling you the story. And two, I am going to disclose the name of the hotel because you should know. And this is just my experience. This is my personal experience of what happened. But before we get into the ghost story of it all, um, let's start at the beginning. When it comes to getting to New Orleans, I was traveling from Minneapolis and I was able to book a nonstop flight on Delta. And it was like super easy trip, maybe 2.5 hour flight. I love that, right? Like that's the best kind of flight in my opinion. You hop on the plane, you're on the plane for like 3 hours, you get off, boom, you're at your destination. And unlike the plane challenges getting in and out of New York City a few weeks ago, everything actually went really smoothly from a flight perspective into New Orleans. And that was a relief, let me say. That was a relief. If I had known what was coming, I'd be like, this is the best part of my trip. Um, My first impressions of New Orleans were holy shit, it's humid. But what the fuck is up with the roads? And wow, everyone is so nice. So nice. Was not expecting that. New Orleans in June. I know you're like, you know what, Ava, this is kind of your fault. Like, what were you expecting? But just for the record, 90 degrees with 90% humidity is, it's thick. It's thick, it's hot, it's humid. It's not the best. It was truly giving swamp in the literal sense, which makes sense because New Orleans is essentially built on top of swampland. Um, the roads surprised me though. I had no idea that so many potholes could exist in one city. There are potholes everywhere. And this is coming from a girl who grew up in Minnesota, where for 6 months of the year, we put salt and sand on our roads as we plow the ice and snow off. And then we spend the next 6 months of the year just patching all the damage that we did to the roads in the winter. New Orleans is really missing the whole patching component of the road damage here. Like, I have never in my life been on a bumpier road. Like, the potholes of New Orleans have the cobblestone roads of Europe beat. And I do not say that lightly. It's the type of ride where you're sitting in a car and the shock system of the car that's supposed to kind of like buffer the bumps like is shot. Like, you can feel it in your gut in the worst kind of way. And I just wasn't expecting that. And frankly, I don't know if the locals know how bad their roads are. I think it could be a situation where, it's just sort of like you live with what you live with and it becomes normalized. But this is not a normal road situation. And I share this with you because one of the things I was considering on this trip to New Orleans was whether or not I was going to rent a car. I opted not to rent a car and I was just going to take Lyfts and Ubers and walk around. And that's what I did. But in retrospect, I'm really glad I did not rent a car because driving in New Orleans, swerving the constant potholes is an Olympic sport. And if you are not trained in this Olympic sport, you really should not dabble for a weekend. Like, it's going to make things less enjoyable. You know what I mean? So, if you're planning a trip to New Orleans, consider picking an area that's walkable. You have restaurants, bars, activities in the vicinity of wherever you stay, and skip the car situation altogether. Like, I do not recommend. And I'm really glad that I did not rent a car in New Orleans. And the people being nice, like on the topic of people being nice, this is something that I wasn't expecting. I'm not sure why I wasn't expecting it because there is the whole kind of stereotype of like Southern hospitality. That was very much the case. And I don't know, like everywhere I went from the moment I landed, it was like everyone wants to chat. Everyone's up for chat. Like, they're going to be, I've learned about, a man's daughter's appendix surgery. Like, I've learned things that I wasn't really expecting to learn just by being in proximity to humans that were like trying to carry on conversation. And that's so funny because depending on where you are in the country or the world, like, this is something that varies a lot. In New York City, like the silent ride is very standard. And I kind of love that. If you're in London, like, you'll walk down the sidewalk, people don't even acknowledge that you exist. I also kind of love that. So the friendliness and the hospitality of the South, or particularly in New Orleans, was surprising, but also it was kind of sweet, like it was endearing. And so it does feel like a very welcoming place for travelers, which It helps. It helps. So those were my very first impressions, right? Holy shit, it's hot, it's humid. What the fuck is up with the roads? Turns out swampland is not a match for concrete. And wow, everyone is so, so nice. When it comes to where to stay, very important. Where you stay is arguably one of the most important pieces of any travel experience. Now, going into New Orleans, I think it's important to acknowledge one, it's a very old city by American standards, right? And with a very old city, you have a lot of history, a lot of good things, but also a lot of bad things and some sort of dark, traumatic events. Also, also, New Orleans is known for being one of the most haunted cities in America. So let's just acknowledge that right now. New Orleans is known for being one of the most haunted cities in America. Okay. Whenever I'm going somewhere that I know is old or has had like traumatic historical events take place, or maybe has a reputation for one thing or another, for example, the French Quarter is very known for being kind of like a party spot. Like it's hectic, think Mardi Gras, think drinks on the sidewalk, think beads and urine on the street. Like, that is kind of the reputation. I do my best to research my accommodations more thoroughly. And for this trip, I knew I really wasn't into staying in the French Quarter party zone, like less Mardi Gras beads, more chill is definitely the vibe I was going for. For that purpose, I ultimately chose to stay in Uptown New Orleans, which I think it was definitely the right area. There's plenty of restaurants and bars. It was less touristy and it was more residential. So, like, you had your homes and real life mixed in with the hotels, kind of like sprinkled in the area. And so I felt good about Uptown. Lots of things I could walk to because I didn't rent a car. But also, I was aiming for relaxation. So it felt like the right choice, that sort of neighborhood vibe that I was going for. When it came to choosing a specific hotel, I was looking for something that felt comfy and updated, but still sort of paid homage to the history of the city. I also knew I was not interested in having a haunted hotel experience. Some people travel specifically to these destinations because they are hoping to have a haunted hotel experience. To be very clear, I was not hoping to have a haunted hotel experience, okay? With this in mind, like I thought I was being smart, savvy bitch, right? With all my research. And the first kind of few hotels that I had my eye on, when it came to reading the like about section of the hotel, kind of like the history, some of the red flags that I noticed in other hotels was like, converted boarding school. And it's like, I don't think I want to stay in a converted boarding school, right? Like that to me is basically saying like this place used to be a mental hospital. Do you want to spend the weekend? And it's like absolutely fucking not. So there are some kind of red flags to me in those types of descriptions where I'm like, it's giving creepy. It's giving potentially haunted. It's giving I'm choosing a different option. I finally, after sorting through a few of those, found a spot that I was really, really excited about. And so I'm nervous to say it. Uh, okay, here we go. So I landed on the Chloe. This is a 14-room boutique hotel, recently renovated, super cute, has the historic charm of the building, but like it's been modernized. It has the amenities one would want for a long weekend. There's a pool, there's an in house bar and restaurant and turn down service and record players in the rooms and free breakfast every morning of your stay. I mean, I could go on about how perfect this property was on paper. Okay. So I said, sign me up, sign me up. And upon arrival, everything was perfect. To be clear, everything was perfect. They had a welcome message in my room with a box of chocolates when I arrived. They provide welcome cocktails that are delicious. They have afternoon turn down service. So I check in, everything is great. I had to take a phone call. And after my phone call and my welcome cocktail, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of tired. It's been a travel day. Like, I'm just going to kind of change and go down and have my first night's dinner at the hotel restaurant. I sat outside. It was super hot, but we're embracing the fact that we're in New Orleans in June, right? This was my choice. I had a glass of sparkling wine. I ordered the Chloe salad, which is like a wedge salad with Cajun shrimp on top, and it was super tasty. And then I had the burger and fries, classic solid meal, and that was good. And, I was vibing. I was vibing. And so after my meal, I headed inside to the hotel bar to grab another glass of wine because, why not? It's Friday night. I'm on vacation. And at the bar, I got to chatting with the bar staff and some of the guests at the bar. And I met a medium. I met a medium at the bar of my hotel in New Orleans, and they were awesome. Like, we got to chatting, we were laughing, we were exchanging stories, like, we were making friends, like, thoroughly enjoyed my conversations with this individual. But one of the first questions they asked me was what hotel room I was staying in. Under normal circumstances, like, I wouldn't tell anyone my hotel room number, right? But for some reason, I trusted, I had trust. So I offer up my room number. Their immediate response was like, oh, okay, good. Like, it's a good thing you're not staying in room 13. And I was like, well, what's up with room 13? They told me that there were some reports of paranormal activity, allegedly, in room 13. And I was like, well, like, what kind of paranormal activity? And they told me that known some people who have stayed in the room that reported bed rocking. And I was like, bed rocking? Like bedrock, like Young Money? Like, what kind of bed rocking are we talking about here? And they're like, no, like, just like bed rocking, like motion that like your bed should not be making, as you're sleeping alone in your bed. And I was like, that is so weird. No, thank you. Right. And so, like, as we're chatting, as we're, having our cocktails for the rest of the evening, like, the running joke becomes like, thank God I'm not in room 13. The night progresses, right? I decide to top off my evening with a little dip of the legs in the pool because, again, it's like 1,000 degrees. So, I dip my legs in the pool. And by that point in the evening, like, there's nobody left in the hotel. Like, the only people there are the people who are staying in the rooms, and everyone's basically in bed, right? Like, the staff is locking up, they're going home. It's dark, right? Like, there's nobody in the hotel. It's really just me. And the inside of the hotel, like, to paint a little bit of a picture for you, it is very dark. The hallways must have been painted dark, dark blue or dark, dark green. I don't recall the exact color, or maybe they were actually black. I mean, the hallways were really, really dark. And they have this really kind of obscure but really interesting carpet on the stairs in the hallway. It's like red with a big alligator print. So, like, it's giving kind of gothic vibes, right? So, as I'm heading up to my room, I'm taking the stairs and it's really dark. I've had a couple glasses of wine. The first sort of bad omen that I see is a cockroach, okay? There's a there's a black cockroach like walking across one of the steps. And I had to like step over the cockroach to keep climbing the stairs to go up to my hotel room. And I was like, oh, like that was kind of gross, but like, it's 2 o'clock in the morning in a dark hallway. Like, I guess, it's cockroach party hour. So I get to my room, wash my face, do all the things, the bedtime routine. And the last thing I did before I went to bed was I filled out my breakfast room service card because, like I mentioned earlier, you get free breakfast every morning of your stay. That was awesome, right? Because, like, there's a whole menu. There's breakfast sandwiches and pancakes and like eggs, and you could pick anything and everything you wanted and then some. So I'm filling out my breakfast card. I'm super excited. I slip it under the door and then I go to bed. I proceed to have a really scary, weird nightmare. I was dreaming that there was a cat with a smushed face and a black tongue that was trying to attack me. And next to the creepy cat, there was like a giant stick bug. Okay. It was bizarre. But I wake up because I'm like, frightened by this cat with a black tongue that's trying to, I don't know, harm me in some way. I, I come to consciousness, I'm awake. I was like, oh my God, like that was such a weird dream. Like, what the hell? And then as I'm kind of drifting back off to sleep, I wake up immediately because I felt my bed rocking. I felt my bed rocking. Okay. It felt like, I'm like, what can I compare it to? If you've ever been really, really wasted, like if you have had far too much to drink and you kind of have the spins and you feel like you're just like moving, but you're not moving, that's what I can compare this sensation to. Okay. So I felt like I was just moving. And the bed rocking, it was not like front and back, it was side to side. It was like this constant back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I actually like I sat up, stood up, I put my feet on the ground. Like I got out of bed, I put my feet on the ground because I'm like, am I just having like one of the did I drink more than I thought I drank? Like, am I having the spins? Like, what is happening? Put my feet on the floor. No, okay, like perfectly still. Mind you, like I'm doing the math in my head. I'm like, how many drinks did I actually have this evening? Because that's really what I thought was happening at first. I had had maybe 3 total glasses of wine, like from dinner all the way through the evening, okay? That's it. No hard liquor, 3 glasses of wine, nothing crazy, right? So I'm kind of like, okay, you're not wasted. Go back to bed. As soon as I start dozing off again, the bed rocking starts again. And by this point, I'm like terrified, okay? I'm like, why is this happening? I'm not in room 13. What the actual fuck? And also like why can't I like stop this motion? You know what I mean? Like I had no physical control over the bed rocking. And I think that was the scariest part about it for me is that I was experiencing it physically, but I was unable to modify the physical experience. Like that for me, I think is what was so scary about it. So this continues all night long. Um I maybe get I don't know how many hours of sleep, like 2, 2. I wake up the next morning, like 2 hours before I set my alarm for my breakfast, right? The breakfast finally comes to my door. I eat 3 bites. Okay? I ordered like a whole like farmer's breakfast, potatoes, eggs, bacon, coffee, smoothie. Like I ordered everything. And I had 3 bites because I just had absolutely no appetite. Absolutely no appetite after what I experienced. The next morning, I spent I spent a fair amount of time like almost questioning whether or not it happened. You know, like I was sitting with the possibility that it was just part of like the continuation of that bad dream. I was sitting with the possibility that I was just drunk and like experiencing something weird, right? I was sitting with the possibility that maybe it was all in my head, because like we were essentially telling ghost stories the night before. When I finally stopped gaslighting myself and accepted the fact that it actually happened, then I started kind of reaching out for help, right? Because I'm like, I'm here for another 2 nights, 3 days, 2 nights. Okay. What the fuck am I going to do? And to provide a little bit of context, if you will, I would consider myself spiritual. Okay. I have had life experiences that have led me to know that there is more to life than what meets the physical human eye. I believe in angel numbers and, spirit guides, spirit animals. I believe in synchronicities, fate, destiny. I believe in manifestation. I love astrology. I believe in aliens. So, like, why wouldn't I believe in ghosts? Like there was never a question of whether or not I personally believed in ghosts. Like, of course, like why not? In the universe, of all the universes, of all the possibilities, like why not ghosts? But I think the difference with all the experiences I have had prior to this particular hotel experience, the difference is like everything I'd experienced previously has felt very warm and friendly. Like, when I'm seeing my angel numbers on the clock, I'm like, yep, I'm on the right track. Like, keep going. You got it, girl. Or like when I've had some of these kind of unexplainable experiences, they've always been very like encouraging. They've been abundant. They've been filled with kind of reassurance and love. And the difference I think here was like this was an experience where it felt it felt scary. Like I was really scared. I didn't sleep for like the next 3 days. Like I got no sleep. And it also felt like very it didn't feel evil by any means, but it did feel mischievous, right? Like it wasn't a pleasant, happy kind of experience. It was very disruptive. It was disturbing. And it was also just kind of like irritating. The other element of it that I'll just add is like also the physical experience of it all was very shocking for me personally. Like, I think a lot of times when I've been transacting with spirit, it's almost been more of like a channeling of knowledge or almost a mental experience, which is kind of funny, right? Because, like, I don't know, like, what's so mental about like spiritual experience? Like, it's kind of weird, but I've processed them all mentally, if that makes sense. And this one directly impacted me physically. Like the bed rocking was such a physical interaction. And so I had never experienced anything like that before. And I was scared and I didn't know what the fuck to do about it. And also, like, it didn't feel nice and friendly. It felt like, let's shake this girl up. Like, so yeah, I mean, I guess in a lot of ways, like for me, this is kind of going down in history as my first paranormal ghost experience. Um, I chatted with a couple of friends who seemed well equipped to give me advice on the situation. And they did, give me a couple of pointers in terms of like how I could maybe be protecting my energy or how I could be negotiating with the spirit. I'll get to some of those tips later in the episode about like how to kind of process this like mentally and emotionally. But for the time being, the show had to go on, right? Like it's my first full night in New Orleans. I had no sleep. It was scary as fuck. At this point, I'm ready to get out of the hotel. I'm like, you know what? Let's go. Let's change the channel. Like, let's go explore. Like, let's see some things and let's eat some food. Okay. So I got dressed and I took a lift down to the French Quarter, right? Because I had to see it. I had to see what it was all about. I had to see it with my own two eyes. And I went down to the French Quarter and I got some beignets. The beignets are one of the most popular food items in New Orleans. If you speak to anyone who's been to New Orleans, like they've had beignets. So I wanted to have this experience. I went to a place called Cafe Beignet on Royal Street. Got my beignets. It came in an order of three. And if you're unfamiliar with them, they're basically, it's like deep fried dough, kind of like donut dough, but it's deep fried dough. And then there's just like a bunch of, maybe it's more like a funnel cake, deep fried dough with powdered sugar on top. And they gave me three huge ones. Me, it's just me. I finished one, okay? But it was really good. It was actually like a little, I was expecting it to be sweeter. It wasn't sweet at all. It was just dough with powdered sugar, deep fried. I mean, it was lovely, right? Like, had to have it, had it, it was good, checked it off the list. But since I was down in the area, I did a little bit of walking around, kind of just checking it out, seeing the vibe. The day I was down there, they were actually getting ready for the New Orleans Pride Parade. And so, they were kind of like blocking off the streets and getting ready. And so, after walking around a little bit and becoming very, very hot and sweaty, I decided to book it back out of there and went back to my hotel and avoided the room, but I went back and I spent some time at the pool. And that was really nice. The thing about this hotel, like the selling point in the summertime is absolutely the pool. There were tons of people at the pool. They have it open to guests and then they also sell day passes to the pool. So anyone like public, locals, people in the neighborhood, or guests of hotel guests can potentially visit the pool. And so it was like a full scene. The pool was a vibe. They were playing music. There was tons of people there. And so this could be, a good way to experience the property. Maybe you just get, a day pass to the pool. Hindsight is 2020. So after a bit of pool time, I was super excited to meet up with my friend who is in New Orleans. So my friend Lorraine is an actor and she was starring in a play that was on for a few weeks in New Orleans. And so this was my big, kind of like arts and culture activity moment. Super excited to see Lorraine Chesley in The Cake. And this is a play that was put on by the Crescent City stage. And I was trying to remember the last time I had even seen a play, to be honest. It's definitely been years. Like, it has been absolutely years. And I'm not quite sure why that is, but I'm really glad that I went. The show was awesome. It's called The Cake. Basically, high level synopsis, it was a story about a baker in North Carolina who was a very, good religious Christian woman. and a family friend of hers daughter asks her to make her wedding cake. And, she's, of course, like initially super excited to make the cake until she finds out that her friend's daughter is marrying another woman. And so throughout the course of the play, this woman is grappling with her beliefs, whether or not she's going to make this cake. And it was a very thoughtful story. It was the perfect play for Pride Month, and it has a happy ending. So, really enjoyed that. Lorene was awesome. She crushed it. I mean, the whole cast was amazing. And the best part, I think, in my opinion, was after hearing about cake for 90 minutes, they actually served us cake. So, like, we got to eat cake at the end, and I'm like, that was thank you. Because had I not had that cake, I really, 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 really would have needed to get the fix somewhere else. But loved it. Great play, great production. Now they're on to their next production of the season. So if you're in New Orleans and you want to have a little cute arts, culture, theater moment, look into the Crescent City stage, see what's playing, and it's a good time. A good time will be had. The only problem with the fact that this play ended was the fact that eventually I'd have to go back to my hotel and go to bed. The second night, I really attempted to negotiate with the spirit in my room by telling them that I would really appreciate getting some sleep and ask them not to bother me. Um, didn't work out so well. Bed rocking second night. As soon as it started, though, like I woke up and I turned the lights on, and I actually slept with the lights on for the next 2 nights. I wish I was joking, but I'm not. Something about having the lights on, I don't know, it just made me feel a little bit better. Maybe, 2, 3 hours of sleep the second night. At this point, like, the sleep debt is going crazy. I've accumulated some sleep debt here, but again, I'm trying to pull the show together, right? I get up the next morning, I don't have breakfast in my room. I go down to the lobby bar for my breakfast. Actually, I think I sat outside because at that point I was just, trying to separate from the energy. And at this point in the trip, I'm starting to get pretty frustrated, right? And you might be wondering, Ava, why didn't you change rooms? Like, why didn't you change hotels? Honestly, like, I thought that I didn't think they were going to believe me. Because, when it comes to like canceling a partial reservation or, even moving rooms, I'm like, well, what's that going to do? I'm not in room 13 and it's still happening. So, like, what's the point of moving rooms? Again, like I mentioned, I didn't think they would believe me. It's kind of hard to be like, hey, there's a ghost in my room. Like, what the fuck are we going to do about this? And so I just didn't. And there were no other accounts of this, like publicly, that I could see at the time. At this point, I was also getting kind of curious, right? Because I'm like, honestly, what's going on here? But I waited to do my research because I'm like, we have to dig deeper. We have to do some research on this building, on this land, what's going on. I waited to do my research until after I left the hotel because I just, it wasn't going to help me. Like, knowing more at that point was not going to help me. But at this point, I'm frustrated, I'm tired. We really need to turn this trip around. We really need to take a turn for the better. So I get dressed, I get out, get another lift, and this time I went to Barracuda Taco Stand for lunch. And wow, was this a great choice? This is a taco stand, I don't know, maybe 5 minute. And to be clear, I was just getting in lifts because it was so hot. I could have walked there. I could have walked there, but I didn't. But this place, maybe 5 minutes, still in the Uptown area. Um, Super cute taco stand, and they've got a really nice kind of built out picnic table area where you can eat. And I ordered a couple different tacos. I got a chicken taco, and then I got a blackened fish taco, and I got a paloma. Both of them were really good, but I think the blackened fish taco was a little bit unique, um, in that it had the fish and it had slaw, but then it had these pomegranate seeds on top, and it was so, so tasty. I loved it. I had a little seat, perfect amount of sun filtering in right next to a fan, and this was a moment where I was like, okay, like this is a good experience. We're getting some food, we're out of the house. It was so good. I'm so glad that I went. Thank you to the Barracuda taco stand for giving me a little bit of life. Not too far from there, I also walked to a place called Hanson's Snow Bliss. Hanson's Snow Bliss. They do shaved ice, like a snow cone. And this is one of those kind of like classic mom and pop stores, really old school. It's been there forever. Definitely necessity because it was so hot. Have I told you that it was hot yet in New Orleans in June? It was hot. The snow cone, which I believe the cup said it was, quote, air conditioning for your belly. They did not lie. Bellies were air conditioned, hearts were healed. It was a nice little moment between the tacos and the snow cone. I'm like, you know what? I'm back. That was a fun little stop. If you're in that area, definitely get some tacos and a snow cone. So by the third night of my stay, I was really resisting. I was really resisting bedtime. I tried to pull an all nighter on the third night because I didn't want to go to sleep. I got close. I think I stayed up till like maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. I was able to kind of like prolong my sleep. The room did have like a very lovely, large soaking bath. So I took a bath. I was listening to a podcast, having a nice moment. After my bath, I took a shower, really, really milking it. And then I got in bed and I'm like, how could one stay up for hours? TikTok. I get on TikTok, I'm scrolling. I scroll until there's nothing left. I scrolled to the bottom of my TikTok algorithm feed. And by then it was 4 a.m. And so I slept for the light with the lights on for the next, 3 hours, got up super early, had my hotel breakfast again, and the last night of my stay was definitely the best. It was the best because one, I knew I was going to be sleeping in my own bed very soon. But two, it was the best because I actually got to have a whole kind of morning, afternoon with my friend Lorene. And so we had a fun time. Thank God. I mean, this was really the redeeming factor of the whole trip. But what we did, we had a little brunch moment on Magazine Street. Now, Magazine Street is also in Uptown, and it's 6 miles of just shops and restaurants, boutiques, bars, all sorts of things, just for blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks on Magazine Street. So, if you're looking for a good place to kind of go and like start your exploration in New Orleans and you're not using the French Quarter as your jumping off point, I would recommend Magazine Street. We had brunch at a really great restaurant called Gris Gris, or maybe it's Grizz Grizz, but I'm going to go with Gris Gris. And this is an award winning restaurant. They do Southern food. They've won all sorts of the best awards in New Orleans. And this restaurant was like really my kind of vibe, like the food is good. It's upscale, but it's not unapproachable, and had some really, really tasty items. But of course, we started off with a bottle of mimosa. We had to have a bottle of mimosa. Like, At this point, I'm celebrating anything and everything left in my being, right? And so the restaurant is known for their oyster BLT. I don't like oysters, so I didn't get the oyster BLT, but that's kind of their thing. I ended up ordering the flambeau shrimp, which were these really tasty, crispy shrimp. They had a honey sauce, they had slaw, and then they had Cajun caviar ranch. Cajun caviar ranch. It was delicious. And I debated ordering a second round of the shrimp because they were so good. This was a lovely moment. We sat on the second floor balcony. We had the most adorable, lovely server. She was awesome. And at the end of the meal, we had some mimosa left. So, what did we do? We poured it into go cups and we drank it on the sidewalk. So, bucket list item checked off. Okay. We checked off the beignets. We've checked off the drinking on the sidewalk. From there, we strolled a bit down Magazine Street, took some photos, took some selfies in front of a Nola mural. That was a cute moment. Kept walking, and our last stop was at French Truck Coffee. And this is a coffee roaster. They have a few locations, I believe, in the New Orleans area. And this was also really nice. So, the thing that they do that's kind of special, or I guess it's New Orleans style with the coffee, is they mix in chicory root with the coffee. So they're blending it, I believe, together like it's ground, right? So you grind your beans, you grind your chicory root. It's all kind of blended together. And like that is the coffee that they brew. And it gives the coffee a slightly sweeter flavor. So it feels in a way like less bitter, but I had a New Orleans style iced coffee cold brew and it was delicious. And so, had some chat, had a little haunted hotel debrief with Lorene, and it was a perfect way to kind of wrap up the experience. From there, I hopped in a car to the airport. It was time to go. But obviously, the story doesn't end there. When I got home, this is when I started doing the research, right? We got to dig in. And so I found some more history on this hotel. And to bring it full circle, I kind of want to just give you, the Cliff Notes version, right? Of what I'm reading on the internet. So the first article I find is, a renovation story of this hotel in Uptown. And there's a lot of aspects of the article. They're talking about, the interior design and who they're working with and who owns it and yada, yada, yada. Your typical new hotel stories, right? But then there's a little section in this article about the history of the building. This is where it gets interesting. So, turns out, why is it not loading? I'm trying to pull up the article and it's like not even, oh my God, did they have it wiped? Okay, so the first article that I read actually isn't even loading on the internet at the moment, which is interesting. But from there was a hyperlink, right, to another article. And this one is hosted on ghostcitytours.com. Okay. Ghostcitytours.com has the whole history of this hotel, formerly house, was actually built in 1891 for the Pickard family. Nothing seemed like initially weird about like this family, right? Eventually the hotel was turned into a bed and breakfast. And it was known by the name of the Avenue Inn Bed and Breakfast. the Avenue Inn bed and breakfast does have quite the history. A few of the things that I read in the article include, first and foremost, the fact that at one point, over 100 cats reportedly lived on this property. 100 cats. Remember earlier when I told you I had a nightmare about a cat with a black tongue? Okay, well, maybe not so weird because if there was 100 cats there at one point, like obviously there were a few tragedies, right? But I'm like, okay, so like that's the cat thing. And apparently this place became kind of known for having ghost cats. There had been in guests who reported seeing cats in the lobby, and they're like, I thought this was a pet free property. And they're like, it is pet free property. And so, they figured, like, okay, these are ghost cats. So we have the ghost cats, right? Would have loved to know that beforehand. Other hauntings allegedly took place. Beds shook on the second floor, and some weird knocks were heard during a wedding. Now, at one point, this building was also apartments, and they interviewed a woman who lived in these apartments, and she was quoted saying she never experienced anything, but this girl's mother believed the place was haunted, claiming she talked to a ghost there. She said it was during the 1960s when she lived there, claiming she met and talked to a ghost, an old sea captain, and that he was a gentleman. I don't know about gentlemen. If I met the same sea captain ghost, I'd say a bit more of a menace. But the bed rocking and the cats published information on the internet that somehow I did not see or come into contact with before booking this damn hotel. Okay. Seeing this made me feel a little bit better in the sense that I didn't make this up. It all checks out. The cats, the bed rocking. Maybe the bed rocking was like, this old seaman, like replicating what it used to be like to like sleep on the sea. Like, who fucking knows? Like, that's kind of the story I've created for myself about it all. But I would have loved if I had run into this information beforehand because you might be interested in having a haunted hotel experience. And, you might seek out this type of information for the best chances of having this experience. Me, I was trying to avoid it. But I didn't do that. The place where I went wrong with all of this is really that the hotel had changed names. It's no longer enough to Google the current name of a hotel. You got to look back at like the last 3 names or 4 names and figure out the history of the building. And even then, like there are plenty of other people staying at the hotel. They didn't look as sleep deprived as I did, to be honest. So, like, not everyone was having the same experience. But my personal experience was, I think, frightening is the best way to sum it up, and disturbing and scary. It was scary. In reflecting on all of this, I was trying to think about like what could be helpful in retrospect, like what was helpful to me to kind of get through this experience, or what would be helpful if you have a haunted hotel experience in the future. Like, what could one do? Looking for some tips for staying in a haunted hotel. And I think first and foremost, like my best tip is don't stay in a haunted hotel unless you really, really want to or you have to. Um, no, but seriously, I think one of the things that was helpful to me was setting boundaries, or at least trying to set boundaries for self protection. And so I think there are a few ways that you can do this. You can use tools. Personally, I didn't really travel with any of my crystals on this trip. A lot of times I like to bring crystals with me wherever I go. I did happen to have, coincidentally or not so coincidentally, a black onyx crystal stone. It's in a pendant that I wear as part of my daily jewelry. And black onyx is known to be a protective stone. So that worked out well. And, what I didn't do on the first night, I take off my jewelry to sleep. The second night, I kept it on. So I wore the black onyx for the remainder of the trip. And I do think that knowing that I had it on me just made me feel better. You can also look to tools, in addition to crystals, like maybe traveling with some Palo Santo or some sage to kind of like smudge a suspicious space. That would have been helpful. I would have loved to have some sage on hand. But just traveling with some things like that, if you do checked bags, and then also just setting boundaries verbally with spirit. So, one of the things that I was encouraged to do while I was there was to negotiate with this spirit. And that means quite literally like talking directly to it and saying, no, please stop. I don't wish to be bothered. I was literally like making a deal before bed. I was like, okay, spirit, here's the deal. I acknowledge your presence. I know that you're here. How about for the next 2 nights, you leave me alone and let me get my sleep? I won't bother you during the daytime. You won't bother me during the nighttime. I mean, I was full negotiation mode. And the second and third nights, like, it definitely was like the bed rocking persisted, to be clear. I feel that it was lessened. I do think my boundary setting and tools helped a little bit, but also in a lot of ways, I'm like, well, it didn't work, girl. Like, that didn't work. I think that for me, I was already kind of in this fear state. And so I was weaker when it came to setting those boundaries. And that's part of honestly what made it so scary for me is like I felt like I really didn't have a lot of control. Um, but like I did what was encouraged, and these are tips that, I will offer up, pass along, and things to consider. Like I am not leaving anywhere without my full set of crystals, moving forward. Also, I don't fly with sage. I feel like that would flag at TSA, like just a bundle of just a bundle of weeds going through security. It's like the same reason that you don't fly with vanilla protein powder, like it's just a little off. Like you don't want to raise suspicions where there aren't any. But maybe I'll try it. I'll try it and I'll report back. I'll see how it goes. But if you do a checked bag, I mean, that would be an easy thing to bring with you. But yeah, boundary setting, like that's what I was really encouraged to do. I don't feel like I was overly successful, but I do feel like the second and third nights, like I was more prepared, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, I mean, my best tip is just don't do it, you know, unless you're into that, unless you're into that, and to each their own. As I do with these travel talks, I always give a rating to my experience in the city, okay? Out of 10. And I don't think I've ever rated a city below a 6. To be honest with you, New Orleans for me was a 4 out of 10. It was a 4 out of 10. And had I not had the redeeming factor of like a really fun brunch day with my friend in town, it would have been like a 2 out of 10. Okay. Um, but again, like there are parts of it that were really enjoyable, right? Like the food in New Orleans was good. The people were really nice. It was, definitely like a lot of things to do. Um, The Uptown neighborhood was like a great place to be. There was a lot of good, but there's also like, I really just couldn't get past the haunted hotel. So, what did we learn here today? First and foremost, New Orleans is known as the most haunted city in America for a reason. They're not playing with that title. Confirmed, certified, verified facts, okay? We've learned that New Orleans is indeed a very haunted place. We've also learned that there's a lot of good food and there's a lot of good people. The flavors, the seasonings, the kind of Cajun Creole influence was definitely something unique to the area. You know, you don't get those flavors in other areas of the United States. Like, it was very uniquely New Orleans, and I really, really enjoyed that. We have also learned that it's best not to rent a car. So if you're planning a trip to New Orleans, skip the rental car, stay in a walkable area, avoid the potholes. Like, it's really unnecessary. You don't need to do that to yourself. And I think we've also learned that you could do all of the research in the world, right? You could read all the Google reviews on a place. You could look at all the Instagram posts. You could check out the website, and you could still not get the full story. You know, like at a certain point in life, you just have to go and experience something for yourself. We've also learned that you've got to check the current name and previous names of really old establishments, right? Like, that's really where this got kind of sneaky for me in my research journey. Do your research. You think you're doing good research, do more research, but then at the end of the day, you just got to go and you got to live. You got to go, you got to live, laugh, love. And once in a while, you might come home with a ghost story. So I think that's a wrap on New Orleans. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, my intention is not to drag anyone or any place through the mud. I simply just needed to share my personal experience. And if you're really into like ghost hunting or staying at haunted places, like maybe that's your whole thing, Maybe you do ghost tourism and like this is so up your alley. Boom, you have a perfect recommendation, okay? But if you have had an experience like this, I would absolutely love to know. If you've been to New Orleans, if you've had a paranormal experience in a hotel, or if you've had something similar happen to you, I'd genuinely love to hear about it. If you want to drop me a line, send me a DM. Um, you could leave a 5-star review and share your story there. Send me an email. I mean, get in touch. Like, I want to hear your stories. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave me a 5-star rating on Spotify, a 5-star review on Apple, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram. I super appreciate it. It goes a long way in letting me know that you're enjoying the show and also helping other people discover their next favorite show. Listen to the More Pod every Wednesday as I share the things that make me more me and discover a thing or two to make you more you.